next up, we will show you how to keep your discard, when to discard, and what, in fact, discarding is. So sourdough discard refers to the portion or the amount of sourdough that is removed after refreshing or feeding your sourdough starter. We have to discard to keep the balance of healthy bacteria and yeast in check, and it also prevents our sourdough starter from growing too large, especially if you are not baking with it. If you're not baking with your starter and you are refreshing this once every 2 weeks, well, you're creating a monster in your fridge. Do not underestimate the power of your sourdough starter and carbon dioxide, okay? You may have already had some explosions or experienced an overfill of your sourdough starter. That discard does not need to go to waste. You can keep that discard in the fridge where the yeast activity lays dormant. You can collect it till you have enough to make one of our recipes here today. I'm going to show you typically how we refresh or feed our sourdough starter, okay? Now the amount you discard, it depends on a number of things, including your maintenance or feeding routine, how much sourdough you need to add to your recipe, and how often you are baking. Here today, I've just taken from the fridge 300 grams, okay? I've got 300 grams of sourdough starter, and I'm going to refresh this. So typically, what you would do is discard 50% and feed in a 1-to-1 ratio of light rye flour and water. So this ratio is then going to become a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. The first one being my sourdough starter, the second being my light rye flour, and the third being the water. 150 grams, so I'm going to refresh 150 grams of my starter, which is half the amount that I have in this bowl. There we go. 150 grams. Now in a 1-to-1 ratio, okay, I am going to refresh now with water and light rye flour. So in with the water, 150 grams. Back to 0, and I'm going to weigh my flour, 150 grams. Lovely. Now I'm going to mix this together, and once it's well combined, my sourdough starter has been refreshed, and this is enough to bake my loaf with tomorrow. So I'll be leaving this at room temperature for 8 to 12 hours so it gets nice and active and I can bake my sourdough loaf with it tomorrow. But this is my discard, and we can use this to complete the recipes that we will show in the discard workshop. So this is my refreshed starter, which will get nice and active in the coming hours, which I will bake with tomorrow. And this will go back into my fridge where the yeast activity will lay dormant and I can bake with it with my discard recipe. So how long can you keep your sourdough discard? Well, this needs to be kept in an airtight container in your fridge. And as long as you haven't got any funky smells or gross going on in there, you are okay to use your discard, okay? Sometimes you can get a liquid on top. That is called the hooch, and it's called the hooch because it can be a little bit smelly, okay? Or you can mix that in, but if you think there is something wrong with your discard, discard of it, okay? And don't use it. So if you want to add discard to your favorite recipes, okay, there is a calculation we can do following simple baker's math. What you need to do is calculate how much discard you have and you want to add to your recipe. You are then going to divide that in half, okay? So if I'm adding 100 grams to my recipe, that I'm going to divide in half, it will be 50 grams. Now that is because it is 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. You then need to subtract the total amount of flour in that recipe. You need to subtract 50 grams from that. And the same goes for the water or any form of liquid you have in that recipe. You would be subtracting 50 grams from the amount of liquid, okay? And then you can add your 100 grams of sourdough starter without changing the composition of your recipe too much.